Hello there everyone, Sammy here, otherwise known as Skog1Fro, and I am back for another video, and let me just quickly say, happy belated New Year! Yes, we are now in 2014, and of course it is now January the 10th, depending on when you're watching this, and I'm kind of late to the whole festive feelings of being a happy New Year and all that stuff, so apologies for being late. But aside from that, I hope everyone had a really good Christmas and you were able to enjoy the holidays, and I hope everyone else out there is doing okay at the moment. Especially for the fact that it's now the new year and that things are progressing slowly at the moment. But I hope everyone is enjoying the new year so far and you are able to do all new different things and stuff like that. So, what am I doing today? Because today I feel like now's the time to do something a little bit different, because I'm not doing a Transformers video today, or anything regarding a review. I'm doing, as you can pretty much tell by the title below, a collection video, because if you remember the room tour I did, I had a box of various different things, movies and whatnot. So, this video is going to be the first of a few movie boxes that I'm going to be showcasing, and showcasing a lot of the movies that I own. Specifically, the one that I'm doing today is regarding a personal favorite of mine, action movies. Now, what can I say about action movies? Action movies really do have a sort of special feeling to them. What more can you say about them? They're fun to watch. They get you really pumped up. They have you rooting for the hero to beat up the bad guys and etc. And movies like that are always fun to really watch, especially action movies from the 80s and the 90s, because you had a variety of actors like Schwarzenegger or Stallone or Willis spouting cheesy but very catchy one-liners that can still be memorized today, as well as just seeing a variety of amazing stunts being performed in those movies. Unfortunately, I really can't say the same for action movies now, because I really feel that action movies from years long gone by that had a very special kinetic feeling to them, I'm under the impression that they don't make films like that ever again, and I really can't say that action film heroes like Jason Statham or The Rock, and if you want to like them, that's fine, have that same memorable feel that people like Stallone and Schwarzenegger had, because something about action films from that era were always so much fun to get into, because I grew up watching them, a lot of people grew up watching them, and they were just so much fun to really get into. So, without any further ado, it's time to show you the first box showcasing my action movies. Let's take a look. Okay, so here is the box of movies showcasing all the films I own, the action movies that I own. And where can I really start with all this? Because I have a ton of movies. Well, like I said previously, action films from the 80s and the 90s, and including the 70s, they had a very unique craft to them. They had memorable one-liners. The action movie heroes were people that you could root for and that you always wanted to be. And the stunts and the explosions for what they were, and I don't like saying this, you could just switch your brain off and enjoy the action and not feel guilty about what you were doing. That's what these films were, and sadly I really can't say the same for action movies anymore today, because they're often taken way too seriously, and they're always pumping out action movies, not very good ones, almost every year. And with these sorts of films, I love, because there's something very special about them that a lot of people really did grow up watching, and that I grew up watching, and why I still watch these films today, and why they're still fun to really get into. So, my 2 cents on that is really the fact that 80s action films and 90s action films really do have a special, memorable feeling to them. So, I'll try my best not to repeat myself throughout this video, but these films, I have managed to at least watch at least all of them, so that really does go ahead and show you that I'm a bit of a cinemaphile. And where to really start? I think the best place would really to start at the very beginning, and I'll try not to go too in-depth regarding each of these movies. I'll just quickly give my 2 cents on which ones are my personal favourites and why I enjoy them. The best place to start would be at the very beginning with the first movie in this box, which is Big Trouble in Little China, directed by John Carpenter. Now, this movie is unique because it has gained a cult following over the years. Now, if anyone's familiar regarding the whole Big Trouble in Little China thing, is that John Carpenter always did horror films. That was his background, that was what he was best known for doing, and he did it so well, because he got the formula so well. And he tried to do a mainstream film, which was this, And unfortunately that backfired in many ways, but thankfully this film found a new audience on home video. So thankfully, whereas it didn't do well in the mainstream box office, it did well on home video and managed to become a huge cult following because of it. And this film is, well, like I said before, this movie has one of those traits that you don't see in action films anymore. It's fun because it's not taken seriously. It's fun because you see actors like Kurt Russell playing the character of Jack Burton, who's on his quest to get his truck back, and his friend, Wang, who's on his quest to get his girlfriend back from the hands of the evil sorcerer David Lopan. That formula is fun. The formula in this movie is fun because there's a bit of a twist to that a lot of people really don't realize, and it's fun because this movie is really enjoyable. So it's one that really I enjoy watching, and a lot of people have really seen over the years. And if you haven't seen Big Trouble in Little China, I would seriously recommend this movie highly. So Big Trouble in Little China, definitely worth checking out. Up next, of course, is a personal favorite of mine that I mentioned previously. Ridley Scott's Black Rain. Now, what can I say about this film that hasn't really been said by me? Well, again, this film has the formula of a cyberpunk movie because it's shot in the way of a cyberpunk movie, more so than all in the same way that Blade Runner was, because the neon lights and the water reflecting off the light reflecting off the water really does show the cyberpunk visual quality in this film. It's a cyberpunk movie without actually being a science fiction film. And regarding Michael Douglas as the cop Nick Conklin, I did say before that Michael Douglas has got this great quality to play both anti-heroes and villains. You saw that in a lot of the films that he was in. And seeing him team up with Kento Kokura, I wouldn't go ahead and say this is like a buddy cop film, but it has that same formula where it's not treated like a comedy. So Black Rain is one that really is one of Ridley Scott's most overlooked films that he did in the 80s, when the 80s were nearly over. And this was sadly one of Yusaku Matsuda's last films, unfortunately. So you won't see another film like this because, this, sadly, again, was the only time, I believe, Ridley Scott ever shot a movie in Japan, and he never shot a film in Japan after that. So, hopefully, maybe in the future, he might do another film in Japan, but I'm not really holding out much hope that he will. But Black Rain is a personal favourite that I love so much. So, Black Rain, definitely one that I really enjoyed. Up next, of course, is Centurion by Neil Marshall. Now, Centurion is kind of weird because Centurion, I would go ahead and say, has an action movie feel to it, but feels more like a thriller because, well, a historical thriller at that. If you're interested in Roman history and you're familiar with the whole backgrounds regarding Roman history, and I'll admit my Roman history is not at best because it's a sort of I don't know. This movie I would go ahead and say is right up your wheelhouse because seeing people like Michael Fassbender and Olga Kurylenko in this film, and as well as Dominic West, do what they're doing. It's one that really I wouldn't go ahead and say it's Neil Marshall's best because he was best known for doing films like The Descent and Dog Soldiers. But this film, it really did show his guerrilla style filmmaking in this movie, and it's shown to a great level as well. So Centurion is one that really, it's kind of a diamond in the rough, I would say, and it's one that really does get overlooked more than once. So Centurion, pretty good. It's a pretty good movie. Up next, of course, is Cobra with Sylvester Stallone. Now, this movie really was what made Stallone, well, after Rambo, of course, what made Stallone an action movie icon, because he was in films like this. And this is one of those movies that it's so bad it's good, and you can enjoy it because it's so bad. Because it's the typical formula of the anti-hero character, which is Sylvester Stallone, who plays Mario Cobra, who is this cop who pretty much doesn't play by the rules, who's more than willing to outright murder the criminal and put the witness in any form of jeopardy whatsoever. But this movie really has got a good formula to it. It's good because it's bad, is what I'm trying to really get at here. And seeing, because George P. Cosmatos, who directed this movie, and Stallone as well, who, both these guys were in Rambo, both these guys did Rambo First of All Part 2. So it's kind of a reunion for both of those two. And if you're aware of the whole history regarding this film, that it was originally going to be Beverly Hills Cop, but Eddie Murphy kind of came in and took the role and did very well. So Stallone did his own Beverly Hills Cop, which turned out to be this. So Cobra, it's a recognizable but incredibly stupid action movie from the back catalogue of Stallone in the 80s. So definitely, it's one that I'm pretty sure a lot of people have already seen. Up next is another stupid film, Commando, which is another one of those films that's so bad, it's so stupid, it's fun. Because this has the formula of what you would expect an 80s cartoon to normally have, where you have the big, steroided, muscle-bound hero, John Matrix, played by Schwarzenegger, go up against a South American country and just outright kill everyone in his path and not miss a single shot. It's a fun film, honestly. It's a fun film that you really don't see anymore. And that's why this film, by the way, this is the American version, by the way, this film was so iconic because it really took Arnold Schwarzenegger's action film caliber and really did enhance it more so than the previous films he did. And it really did show that he was really quite well suited for this part. And why this film is not to be taken seriously, because, like I said, it's fun, and the final battle between Schwarzenegger and Vernon Wells in this film is one that is quite a standout in this film. There are many standout moments in this movie, but it's one because this film has what you would expect. Memorable one-liners and catchphrases, just stupid action, and just a very weird story that really you would that today doesn't make much sense. But but Commando is one that I really enjoy watching. So Commando, really good movie. Up next, of course, is Darkman. Probably not so much a action movie. This has a kind of horror film feel to it, because Sam Raimi, he wanted to do Batman, but that never really came out. That never really happened. So instead, he wanted to make his own superhero movie before he did films like Spider-Man. And this movie really did show that he was quite well suited for that little position, and more so than Spider-Man, I think. So Darkman, it's a weird movie, because not only sadly did this movie not do have a good reputation afterwards, because it had two very bad direct-to-video, or in this case direct-to-DVD sequels, with Arnold Vosloo instead of Liam Neeson. And Liam Neeson, who years before he was in things like Taken and stuff like that, it proved that at first I thought he was very miscast as the character Peyton Westlake, but seeing him in this film really did show that he was quite well suited for the part. And that he really did look the part, he really did feel the part of Peyton Westlake. And it really does show his acting skills quite well in this movie. So Darkman is one that I think, it's probably one of Liam Neeson's most recognizable before he became more popular than he is today. And it's definitely one that Sam Raimi was quite well adjusted to. Pretty much after he did Evil Dead, he wanted to do something very different. And this really did just show that very well. So Darkman, the first Darkman, is a great movie to really check out. Up next, of course, is Demolition Man. And Demolition Man is it's a weird film with Stallone and Wesley Snipes. And, of course, seeing these two go head-to-head with each other. It's, I want to say it's like a science fiction film. It has a science fiction theme to it. And it shows greatly in the future that it's set in. But not only that, this film has a very weird satirical feel to it, because it was kind of a way of showing that this is what the future would be like years from now. Of course, that's not true, but years from now, this is what the future we're aiming toward. And that all things will be outlawed, and pretty much this whole century will be controlled by one person, which of course in this film was Nigel Hawthorne, but that's the future that I think we were kind of really aiming toward. Thankfully, I hope that we don't go to that future, but this film, it's fun because it's, again, another Stallone film where you see Stallone doing what Stallone does best in movies like this, where you see his action movie quality really being enhanced to great measure, as well as just seeing him going head-to-head against someone like Wesley Snipes. And for the fact that it's a satirical tone, because, of course, with these two guys being from a different century, they're frozen and being awakened in this in a futuristic day and age. It shows it's weird to take a character who from the two characters from the past that have been frozen, who of course are now in this weird and uncomfortable futuristic setting. So it's one that really, it's fun to enjoy because of, and enjoy its stupidity because of it. And by the way, just quickly saying this now, this movie honestly has the exact same formula of another movie that came out a year after this, Judge Dredd, which I'm just going to go ahead and say the formula in both those movies is so similar, and I think this film does it much better, honestly. Just going to end it right there. So, Demolition Man, definitely a good movie. Up next, of course, is Dirty Harry and Magnum Force, the only two Dirty Harry movies that I own. Reason because the other two movies that that followed after these two, despite the fact that the other one, of course, had the memorable line, "Go ahead, make my day," and of course, the Deadpool, I didn't like those films that much. Only Dirty Harry and Magnum Force really did work for me because these two films really did show that Clint Eastwood had this great character quality to character and actor quality to play the anti-hero cop who doesn't play by the rules, who has no morality whatsoever, who goes to great lengths to pursue the criminal at great measure. In the first Dirty Harry movie, where he pretty much goes head-to-head against Andrew Robinson. And in Magnum Force, it's kind of more of a political thing because where he's under the influence of the corrupt law, which is kind of holding him back, and they're the ones behind the scenes. Seeing Clint Eastwood play Harry Callahan and seeing him deliver memorable lines like "Do you feel lucky?" or "Do you punk?" Really, I think more than any other, those films, and I'm repeating myself again, they were defining because of the one-liners, but because they were just so much fun to really see this character who wasn't a hero for a change. And Clint Eastwood always had this amazing quality to play anti-heroes on screen. Whether in a western or a war film, or even in anything like this, his quality really did show to great measure. So, Dirty Harry, I think, really did show that quite well. And in Magnum Force, with, when this film was written by John Milius, it did show a little bit of the whole gun establishment right there, the whole weapon establishment, as well as just how well this film was shot and how well this film was edited. So, Dirty Harry, Magnum Force, two really good films with Clint Eastwood. Up next, of course, is another film by John Carpenter with Kurt Russell, Escape from New York. What more can I say about this film? I like it because how can you not love a character, the character of Snake Plissken, who is, again, another anti-hero. You can pretty much see that I'm a big anti-hero fanatic, can you tell? Well, how can you not love a character who has no morality whatsoever, who completely does not give a shit about anything except himself, and who is begrudgingly being forced to take this task to rescue someone that he wouldn't ordinarily give two shits about, and being involved in a war that he wouldn't ordinarily care about? That's interesting, I think. And really there isn't anything that interesting about the character of Snake Plissken, because at the core, the character is very one-dimensional, but in this movie it worked so well because of the setting and how well this film was established. And it really did show that John Carpenter did have an eye for doing films in different genres, and the action movie genre, I think, really did, was an example of where it shined for him, I think. Seeing how this film would later go on to have a bit of a cult following. And just as well for seeing that this film, again, it's another anti-film, like I said before. But like I said, this film has got a great cast, and this film has got some really good, it's got some great music, by the way. And it's one that really, it's held up over the years quite well. So, Escape from New York, definitely a weird film in John Carpenter's back catalogue, but it's one that I think stands out well for his skills as a director. So, Escape from New York, definitely worth checking out. Up next is Extreme Prejudice, directed by Walter Hill. Now, Walter Hill, who I would consider as probably the most overlooked director of the past few decades, always had this way of doing a very male-driven movie in any setting. But this film has the formula of a Western movie. By that I mean, the way that it's set in, pretty much the setting. The setting, of course, the setting is one that, well, it's set in the modern age. I think it's set in the 80s, and seeing the other two characters of Jack Bentine and Cash Bailey, pretty much have very old Western qualities to each of these characters. Who both these characters were childhood friends at one point, and the rivalries that would later go on and get heated down in this movie really does show greatly. This film has got a great ensemble cast with people like Nick Nolte, Clancy Brown, Michael Ironside, Powers Booth, who kind of became a bit of a regular with Walter Hill. And this film is obscure because it's where Walter Hill, I think, really did show his skills again as a director, because Walter Hill does have this good quality for making these sorts of films, and Western films are particularly his favorite. And it's one. And by the way, the title is from Prejudice. In case anyone hasn't already seen this film, and anyone who's aware of this film's writer, who of course is John Milius, he wrote the script for Apocalypse Now, and of course you are aware of the line, "Terminate with extreme prejudice." Well, that line, of course, is used in this movie, but the title of this movie pretty much comes from that. So, so you pretty much are aware of this film's history in the most shortest description possible. So, Extreme Prejudice, it's definitely one of I wouldn't say it's one of Walter Hill's greatest, but it's one where it really does stand out for a director like him. And the like I said before, this has the quality of a Western movie, so it's definitely worth checking out. Up next, of course, is Highlander, the Immortal Edition. Now, again, what can I say about this film that hasn't already been said? This film is a defining film. It's a defining film that had an original idea at the time. It had a great director, not so much a great actor like Christopher Lambert, but when you had people like Sean Connery and Clancy Brown, who were great leads in this movie, they really just show that this film would develop a cult following over the years. But unfortunately, this film did have a terrible fall from grace with the sequels that would follow from there, and the whole Zeiss thing and etc. And you're pretty much aware of the whole reputation that the sequels have. So I won't go ahead and go ahead and spill the whole depth regarding that. But the first Highlander, the first Highlander film, really it's a be-all end-all film, because where else could it go from there? But it's one that I really enjoy watching. I wouldn't even put it in the same category as an action film, because it has not the setting, but the whole thesis of that drives this movie, particularly the whole immortality thing. It has the formula of what you would expect a fantasy film to have, and in some way there is a bit of a fantasy film quality to this film. And this film really it has held up quite well over the years. And it's one that really a lot of people go back to quite frequently. It might not be, I'm not saying that this film is perfect, because, like I said, the acting from Christopher Lambert is a little bit ragged at best. But this film really, I think, did show his charisma as an actor, I would say. So, Highlander, the first Highlander, not the sequels, really is a film that really, there can be only one. Just wanted to say that now. Up next, of course, is the Mad Max Trilogy. The first Mad Max, The Road Warrior, and Beyond Thunderdome. I have a bit of a weird feeling with this movie because, again, anti-hero-driven movie, but it's set in the post-apocalyptic Australia. So that's a good formula to have for this movie. And I have a bit of a Marmite feeling with this movie, with these movies, because these films do go on a little bit of an up-downhill slope regarding how they would go over the years. Because the first film, it was a good movie. The second movie, The Road Warrior, was what people mostly remember, and that was a great movie as well. And Beyond Thunderdome, I did not like Beyond Thunderdome. I thought Beyond Thunderdome did have the formula of what you would expect a futuristic Peter Pan to have, and it really it didn't. Well, okay, it didn't work because it was totally different, but I think it worked because it managed to bring the character of Max Rokitansky back round full circle and rediscover his humanity again. Because after he went on this journey to avenge his family, and when he was pretty much all by himself, and he was a character that he was in it for himself and doesn't give a shit about anyone else. And Mel Gibson, who sadly is one of those actors that did have a bit of a fall from grace. This was before that, unfortunately. Well, this is before that, thankfully. And it really does show his you know, years before you did films like Lethal Weapon and Braveheart and stuff like that. So this of these films, well, the first two I would instantly consider are great for what they are. The third one, easily I would consider to be a joke. That's really all I can say about that. The third one is nothing more than a joke. And Tina Turner playing the character of Auntie Entity, it's not going to cut out, I'm afraid. So, yeah, the Mad Max trilogy, the first two Mad Max films are good, but Beyond Thunderdome is a pile of shit. Just going to see that right there. Up next is Pathfinder, which is another one of those movies that didn't do well. In fact, it did horribly badly at the box office. But again, it found a new audience on home video. And it's one of those films that is directed by Marcus Nispel. And Marcus Nispel, who a lot of people kind of really bash on in many ways, because he has got potential. I'm just going to say right now. Marcus Nispel has got potential to be a good filmmaker, but he often does make a lot of bad decisions in his, status as a filmmaker. Pathfinder, I think, really does show his eye, his film eye for this movie, because, and this is really one of the only movies I can think of where you can actually take Vikings seriously, because up until then, Vikings weren't taken very seriously in film. Well, like I said, this film has it's shot in the way of a comic book. The visuals are very dark and very grungy. It's very dirt under the nail sort of movie. And it's one that really does have a sort of unique but very grungy feel to it. At first, it starts off like how the first Rambo movie starts off. But then, of course, it's more or less about the character of Ghost, played by Carl Urban, who's coming to difficulties with who he is, who he belongs to, and what he's fighting for. And, well, okay, it's definitely one that Marcus Nispel really did start off with on his film career, and it's one that I think really... Give this movie a second chance, is all I'm trying to say. Try and see this one from a different perspective, because this film is ridiculously violent, and it's ridiculously shot regarding the editing, as well as just the dark cinematic feel to it. But it's one that really is enjoyable because, again, it's an action film. It's a survival action film as well. So it's one that really is a different experience. So Pathfinder really is one that is worth checking out. Up next, of course, and this is just going to have to get these out of the way, are the Predator films. Predators, first off, I'll just get this out of the way. The first two Predator movies and Predators. What more can I say about these films? These films are great. These are great films because, the first movie, I will go ahead and say, really was a Schwarzenegger-driven movie, because this, again, was experimenting with Schwarzenegger as an action movie icon. But it really did have a unique idea of taking these Marines, these guys who are dropping them in the jungle to go on this ridiculous mission, and whilst that's going on, they are being pursued by this hunter from another planet, the Predator. And the Predator, of course, has grown to be a huge icon in special effects, as was science fiction in general, specifically for the fact that this character was designed by the late Stan Winston. So the first Predator really does have some greatness to it. It's why action movies from the 80s were so much fun, because you had memorable one-liners. And the Predator 2, which I honestly do like Predator 2. I know that a lot of people don't like Predator 2, but Predator 2, I think, really had a different feel to it, I think. Because it was set in the city, and it didn't have Schwarzenegger, it had Danny Glover. It really did have that great formula which you could take this extraterrestrial hunter and put him in this suburban, pretty much in this modern suburban area, and have the character Danny Glover just out looking for him, and just out wondering why are these murders going on. So this film, it's not as good as the first Predator movie, but it's one that really it tries to be good. It's a good movie that I think a lot of people really have a lot of negative criticism for. Predators, on the other hand, is great because this is the exact treatment that I've been waiting for regarding Predator, because the early vs. Predator movies did nothing for me, and Predators, I think, really just, with directors like Nimrod Antal and producers like Robert Rodriguez, this film really is grounded in the way of an 80s action film because the formula is copied in the same way of an 80s action movie. In fact, the plot of this movie is so similar to the first Predator, so there really isn't anything different. Except whereas the first Predator had to get to the chopper, they have to get to the ship, because they are now on the alien homeworld of the Predators rather than being stranded on the Earth, which is a good formula. I'm waiting for a sequel of this movie to be made, because this film is exactly the kind of movie why I've been waiting for a proper sequel to Predator. Because sadly, like I said, the Alien vs. Predator films really did absolutely nothing. They were really abysmal films regarding however you look at it. So, Predator and Predators, really, really good films. Especially Predator 2. Like I said, Predator 2 needs to be given a second chance. I know a lot of people like Schwarzenegger being the action movie hero that he is, but I think Danny Glover was fine for what he is, especially when you saw him in films like Lethal Weapon. So, these films are really good for what they are. Now, up next, of course, is the Ultimate Rambo Collection. Yes, the Rambo films. What can I say about the Rambo films? Okay, just quickly going over this, I thought the first one was fantastic, the second one was okay, the third one was shit, and the fourth one was fantastic. That's my 2 cents on that. The reason I say that is because First Blood is essentially set in a much more different universe than the other Rambo films, and of course, they had to change the ending of that movie, because if you've read the novel of First Blood by, I think it's David Morrell, the character John Rambo does die. But, of course, in traditional Hollywood fashion, they wanted to keep the character alive, and, of course, spawn a variety of sequels. And it didn't really... I don't want to say it didn't work out well, but it has a bit of a mixed feeling to it. It's one of those... It's a mixed feeling because the other two movies that would follow from that did not work as well. Only Rambo, when you saw Stallone in the autumn years of his career and his life, it really did show that the character was... it was good to revisit the character and really see him in this much more different setting than he was in the other films. So they are really good movies for what they are. The third one, the second and third, like I said, I would not regard the second and third as being nothing more than your typical action movie. Because once the first one made a huge success, the second two were just as an attempt to just kind of really reel in more money. So, unfortunately, I've got nothing nice to say about the other Rambo, about Rambo First Blood Part 2 and Rambo 3. Those two films really, I tried to really give them chances, but really they just do nothing for me, honestly. So the Rambo series has a bit of pretty much of an up-down thing going for it. So, but at the same time, though, it's a good series to really get into, especially for seeing the character of John Rambo, who isn't an anti-hero, surprisingly. He's just a guy who's really pissed off. And especially for the first Rambo film, First Blood, which I would easily consider as being one of the best action films of Stallone's career, really did show in many ways how, for the fact that Stallone could really do dramatic performances, it showed quite well in here. So, the Rambo collection... the other two films are shit, but the First Blood and Rambo are great films for what they are. Okay, well, I'm kind of on a roll now, actually, so let's just speed this up. Up next, of course, is a buddy cop film directed by Walter Hill, Red Heat. This, again, was another example of why 80s action films were so much fun, because, especially the buddy cop film, because Walter Hill previously tried the buddy cop experience. He began the buddy cop the film genre with films like 48 Hours, and from there, films would go on doing this exact same thing. And with seeing actors like Schwarzenegger and Jim Belushi on screen together, it's an interesting chemistry, I think, because both are from different countries. Schwarzenegger, of course, plays a Russian cop. Jim Belushi plays an American cop. And they both are so totally different. One's very quiet and very stoic and very dedicated to his job. The other one is a loudmouth, obnoxious prick, basically. But it's fun to see the chemistry really develop between the two. Not to mention for the fact that Walter Hill, like I said, Walter Hill has got a good eye for action movies. And seeing these two on screen, as well as just for the fact of the plot of of Stallone and both no, not Stallone, Schwarzenegger and Belushi go after this this Russian drug dealer who's played by Edo Ross. The formula is really good because there are in this movie a lot of good one-liners, and the cast in this movie is quite strong. So this movie is what I would probably consider to be one of Walter Hill's best, easily his best. So Red Heat, it's one that really made Arnold Schwarzenegger a recognizable action movie icon. Up next, of course, is a favorite that everybody has seen, Robocop. Now, what can I say about Robocop that hasn't been said? Well, if I go ahead and tell you the whole thing already, you already know what this film's about. This film has some great themes regarding corruption and corporate fuckery, as well as just the fact that this film took directors like Paul Verhoeven and actors like Peter Weller and put them in this futuristic but 80s setting, added with a science fiction element, but also with a bit of a very over-the-top action quality to it, and that's why this film is so iconic. And this film, really, what else can I say about it? This film is a defining film because it's a great action film. There's some great effects, great stop motion, great acting from both parts, well, from all parts actually, and the cast is quite well put together. And I know that there's a remake coming out this year, which I'm a little bit reluctant to, but if that film manages to do kind of what this film does, then you know what, I can give it a go. So the first Robocop and the only Robocop, because unfortunately this is one of those films that had a bit of a fall from grace, in which the first film was great, but the sequels that would follow from this were just absolutely terrible. The second one, because it was directed by Irvin Kushner, was passable, but again though, it's still at its core was nothing more than a piece of shit. So Robocop. The first Robocop, definitely one that if you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. It's really a defining film. Up next is, of course, Streets of Fire, directed by, you guessed it, Walter Hill. Streets of Fire really, I think, is, again, another one of those films that did terrible at the box office and found a new life on home video. And this is a weird movie because Walter Hill, of course, like I said, has a great eye for action films. And this film it's unusual because it's a mix of both comedy, action, drama, and musical. This film's a musical, believe it or not, because the setting of this movie, it's set in a very weird 50s era, but the music, of course, is from the 80s. Which it's a mishmash. It's a mishmash quality of both, and it works surprisingly well. And Michael Paré, who went on to do a lot of Uwe films, sadly, his performance as the soldier of fortune, or anti-hero, Tom Cody, it's a good performance, I think. And the interesting thing regarding this movie, that I'm pretty sure a lot of people already know, especially a lot of anime fans might know, a lot of old school anime fans might know, is this movie was the direct inspiration for Kenichi Sonoda's sci-fi classic Bubblegum Crisis, because the character of Pris Asagiri is modeled after Diane Lane's character Ellen Aim. The music that she sings and the way that she looks on stage is is modeled after the character of Pris Asagiri in the band Press and the Replicants, which again is it's a direct inspiration from Blade Runner, but it's a loving homage. So this film had its huge influence on people in the anime industry, believe it or not, and it's one that really, it might not be one of Walter Hill's best films, but it's one that really I think stands out because it was intended to be a summer blockbuster, but really didn't do all that well. So Streets of Fire is one that really is worth checking out. Streets of Fire, definitely a quality film by Walter Hill. And, of course, since I'm on about Walter Hill again, we're looking at another film directed by him, Southern Comfort, which I wouldn't even consider an action film. It's in that same breath as films like Deliverance. This film is amazingly good. It's amazingly good because Walter Hill used a very Deliverance, but also guerrilla-style filmmaking to this film, where you have these guys dropped off in the Louisiana swamps and then being picked off one by one. I would say that this has I wouldn't say this is like a horror film, but it has a thriller to it, and that's why both formulas in this movie work so well. And the cast is quite strong. We have people like Powers Booth, a regular of Walter Hill, Keith Carradine, again a regular Walter Hill, Peter Coyote, and Brian James, I think, who's in this movie. The cast is well established in this movie, and it works so well. And it's one that really does show his own Walter Hill skills as a director, that he could churn out any good movie. And this is where I would probably easily consider, and this is trying to sound not hyperbole, this is one of Walter Hill's greatest films. It's where he really did he took this good setting and used it so well. So Southern Comfort. At some point, I will do a top 10 list of a top anything of the best Walter Hill films that I have in my collection. But for the moment, Southern Comfort really is a great film by Walter Hill, so definitely one worth checking out. We're kind of winding the list down now, so let's continue onward. Up next, of course, is Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. Now, again, what can I say about these films? These films were great back in the day. They still are great films. And it really did show that back then, when James Cameron was nothing more than a small independent filmmaker, he had the idea of taking this weird idea when he was ill and making a movie out of it. And with the first Terminator film, it really does show that quite well. And this film, again, it has its action movie quality, but feels more like a horror. And it does when you think about it, because with the character of Sarah Connor, who's played by Linda Hamilton, and the character of Kyle Reese, who's played by Michael Biehn, who are being pursued by this Terminator from the future, who's played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. The formula really is quite good, and it works in both ways, I think. The action movie genre and the horror genre work quite well for the first film. And Terminator 2, what can I say about the second film that hasn't already been said? This is how you do a sequel. This is how James Cameron really wanted to work continue the mythology of the Terminator series, and did it so well in the second film. And with lines like Hasta la Vista Baby and whatnot, it really did show that these films were quite iconic because they had memorable one-liners like this. So both Terminator films, the only Terminator film, sadly, which I would recommend, because the series, unfortunately, did crash and burn once the third film came out. And the fourth film, I can't explain the fourth film in any detail without foaming at the mouth and raging in your face, so I'm not even going to waste my time. So the first Terminator films are fantastic films, worth checking out. Especially if, regarding the fact that these are also action films, they also do have a science fiction quality to it. Terminator 2, of course, did experiment firsthand with what CGI could really do as well. So definitely these two films, if you haven't checked them out, and I'm pretty sure you already have, check these two films out, but if you haven't, definitely look them up. Up next, of course, is Tango and Cash, a really overlooked buddy cop movie with both Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell. And this is one that really, again, as you guessed it, didn't do well in the box office, but found a following on home video. And this movie really is nothing more than... the entire script of this movie is nothing more than composed of cheesy, memorable dialogue and one-liners, and that's why this film stands out so well. And the chemistry between both Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell works quite well, I think. And this film was directed by, or what's his name? I think it's, I can't pronounce this guy's name, Andrei Konchalovsky, who most people might know today as the director of that awful movie, The Nutcracker in 3D. This was before that. But this movie, I think, really did show that he had a, well, not so much a keen eye for action cinema, but he took a very good idea and worked with it, I think. And this film is played out in an action movie tone, but played out a little bit like a comedy, because where these two characters are bickering constantly with each other. And where you see the villain, who's played by Jack Palance, with his well-done suit, slick back hair, and Jack Palance, who's sailing along with us, really did have a good on-screen presence in any film that he's in. So Tango and Cash, it's one of those films that I'll probably consider to be so bad it's good. It's bad because it's fun to really get into, and you can just switch your brain off and enjoy the action and not feel guilty by what you're doing. So Tango and Cash, it's a really good buddy cop movie. And finally, just to bring this video to an end, we are looking at a favourite of mine, but I probably shouldn't even like this movie anyway, Total Recall. Now, as I mentioned before, I have never read. I will eventually get around to reading the novel that this was based off, because this was based off a novel by Philip K. Dick. But for me personally, to like this movie as a favorite, I love it because of the action. I love it because of the direction by Paul Verhoeven, and the practical effects by Rob Bottin are amazingly well established in this movie. They work so well in this film, and it works because the science fiction quality, and this is why you don't see films like this anymore, the science fiction tone for this film, with it essentially feeling like an action movie as well, with the practical effects really kind of working alongside that, it worked amazingly well. Especially for the fact that even though, I would go ahead and say that Schwarzenegger was a little bit miscast as the character Douglas Quaid, but I think he managed to work well in this film. Not to mention for the fact that the villain in this movie, well, two villains, you have Michael Ironside and Ronnie Cox. Both those two are great villains in this movie, especially Ronnie Cox, who always played normally police chiefs, especially in films like Beverly Hills Cop. But in films like Robocop and films like this, he played the villain amazingly well. So, also as well regarding the remake, I have not seen the remake. I will probably get around to seeing the remake just to see if I can compare notes to that movie and see if that movie is as loyal to the novel. But from the looks of it, it looks pretty, but honestly, I don't think it's any good. I'm just going to go ahead and say right now, I don't think they should remake movies. I think they should just try and be original with what ideas that they could have in films. But Total Recall is a favourite of mine that I mentioned before in the top 10 favourite movies that I have, that I really love. And Total Recall, like I said, it's one that I thoroughly enjoy. It's a bit dated from an effects degree, but it's one that I thoroughly enjoy watching. So that's all I can say about that. So, with that being said, that brings us to the end of the video. I've rambled on long enough and pretty much showcased all these films I have. At some point, I will do another collection video of the films I own, but not too soon though, because I want to at least try and work out what ones I really want to do. So until then, everybody, thanks for watching. Take care. Happy 2014 and whatnot, and I'll see you in the future. Take care.